In this video, we're just going to look at some final factors that can impact both aggregate supply and our total living standards, and then just do a bit of a recap on some of the most important demand and supply side factors in 2016, because these are the ones that you're more likely to get tested on in an exam. So you need to be able to go, this is my demand side factor, this is my supply side factor, how are they influencing our growth in 2016? So capacity utilization can have an impact on our growth rates. So high capacity utilization means we're using more of our resources. So basically we're nearly reaching our productive capacity if we have high capacity utilization. We're using most of our available labour and capital resources. This is generally due to excess demand, but it can also be due to an insufficient level of private and public investment, which basically means that we don't have the investment in physical capital, and therefore we don't have the infrastructure to meet our demand at that point in time. So a country can have high capacity utilisation purely because they're in a peak and they're utilising most of their resources and they don't have much unemployment, but it can also be due to a lack of appropriate infrastructure spending in the past. At lower capacity utilisations, we have excess resources, inflation is less of an issue. Generally, if we're below about 81%, we assume that the capacity utilisation is quite small. Higher than 81%, supply is struggling to keep up with demand. And the problem with that is it can lead to significant inflationary problems. This was the case back in 2008, just before the GFC. We had lots of demand for our minerals, but we had significant capacity constraints because we didn't have the infrastructure to meet that high level of demand. Causes of capacity constraints. Short term, it could be caused by increased efficiency in the way we're using our resources, and it could be caused by basically us utilising our available resources very efficiently at that point in time and not having many idle resources, which is good. But in the long term, it can lead to things like shortages of skilled labour. So if we have a shortage of labour, that can lead to wage pressures and be bad for our economy because it's going to lead to inflation. It could be because of a lack of infrastructure, which will cause bottlenecks and traffic jams and basically an economy that's not able to demand to meet its level of supply. And that's going to lead to reduced efficiency because, well, essentially we can't do what we want to do. We can't export at the levels we would like to. The bottlenecks might be that our machinery is just not up to standard. It may be that we have a lack of labour available and therefore we can't deliver the level of output necessary. It's also a feature of low unemployment rates. So low unemployment rates means that we're using our available labour very efficiently or to its capacity, and that can lead to wage pressures and inflation and can lower our international competitiveness. So capacity constraints, you've got to be very careful about these questions. It's not a bad thing if we're working close to our productive capacity, but we want to be able to push out our supply in the long term to meet that extra demand. If we're not able to do that, then capacity constraints will become an issue for our economy because we don't have the supply to meet demand. So you can see that there's different capacity constraints in different industries. If you look at mining, they will basically stretch their physical limit back in 2012, if I could draw a straight line. But now they've increased their infrastructure spending and there's less demand for our commodities, so it's not really an issue at all. Okay, we're not experiencing capacity constraints in that industry anymore. We're very far away from our productive capacity. In manufacturing, it hasn't really been an issue because nobody wants our stuff anyway. But for all industries, capacity utilisation at the moment is about 81%, which isn't too bad. We've got a little bit of excess supply to meet any extra demand. We will be able to supply more if there's an increase in demand in our economy. So demand-side policies are fairly useful at the moment. The other thing just to be aware of, and we'll talk about this a lot more in Unit 4, but another way we can boost our supply, so it's a supply-side factor, is microeconomic policies. So that includes things like labour market reforms, whereby we try and reform our labour market to make them more productive. So, employing people on individual contracts to make them work harder, getting rid of unfair dismissal laws so they're more likely to work. That's a form of microeconomic reform. So it's basically changes by the government to try and make workers more productive. Another type of microeconomic reform is tariff cuts, again trying to make us more competition in the industry, more competition from imports, which can lead to increased productivity. Other types of microeconomic reform include privatising a lot of industries, so there's more competition, so things like Telstra, Qantas, the banks, all of that to make them more competition and boost our productivity, reduce production costs and boost aggregate supply. So the idea of all these microeconomic reforms is to boost productivity, lower costs of production, and improve our long-term productive capacity or supply potential. This is we study one of these in Unit 4. We will probably study trade liberalisation, which involves tariff cuts amongst and a lot of other forms of getting rid of other forms of protection like quotas and subsidies and things like that. Okay, to sum up basically everything we've done in sort of these last 9 or 10 videos, as I said to you, in your exams it's a lot more likely that you're going to be asked about some current demand or supply side factors. So this is basically just summing up the key demand side factors that are causing higher or lower growth and some of the major supply side factors impacting our growth at the moment. So demand side factors impacting our growth, okay, the main positive one is lower interest rates. That's a domestic thing, so it's not a global impact. But interest rates are really low. That's boosting discretionary incomes, increasing investment spending, increasing consumption spending, lowering household saving rates. Decreases in tax rates, again, not that relevant anymore because they haven't lowered taxes for a while. They decreased taxes in about 2013 and they increased the tax-free threshold, which meant that you didn't have to pay tax until you earned more money. But it's not really a relevant thing at the moment, so I wouldn't use that one. The other main positive demand side factor, particularly this year, is the falling exchange rate, making our exports cheaper, and therefore helping to generate employment and income in export-related industries. So they're your two main positive demand side factors. Interest rates are down, and the exchange rate is down, which is good for demand. This one here, since I've actually done this probably fits more into this category here now, because household savings ratios are falling, which is a sign that there's more consumption expenditure. This one's a little bit in limbo at the moment, so I probably wouldn't choose this one. But the big demand side factor decreasing our growth, well, this one here's the big one. Falling terms of trade. We're getting a lot less money for our exports than we did in the past. That's leading to less employment in the mining industry, lower consumption spending, significantly less investment spending. So use the terms of trade and then link it to investment spending. That's the big thing causing a decrease in aggregate demand at the moment. Lower commodity prices, less profits for income-related industries, less income, less consumption spending, and less investment spending because firms aren't investing because they're not getting the same level of profit. And the other one is slower growth in China and the Eurozone, which is leading to less exports, less demand for our commodities again, and therefore slower growth, less consumption, less investment, and less income. Supply side factors, lower interest rates, reducing production costs for businesses is a favourable side. But the big one at the moment is the slow growth in real wages. And real wages are only going up by a very small percentage, and that's helping to keep our real unit labour costs under control and making us more internationally competitive. That's your big supply side factor. This one, and this one are the three things that I would be focusing on, and perhaps the lower exchange rate, if you get the choice. Again, tax rates aren't really changing, so I wouldn't focus on it too much. You could say the company tax rate went down last year as a positive demand and supply side factor, but it's probably not as relevant. Supply side factors, again, a little bit outdated. We haven't really had any big natural disasters. The big ones at the moment would be the ageing population, causing the decrease in participation rates, and perhaps the lower exchange rate increasing the price of imports as another negative supply side factor. So I would go with this one, in terms of trade, and lower interest rates if I was you and you got the choice. Thank you.